Go.
All right. Well,
You did it.
thank you. We apologies for the technical difficulties there that the attendees online got to miss, and the people in the room got to hear. My ears are still ringing a little bit, but we're good. So this is the first talk in a while in the Sociotechnical Cybersecurity speaker series. And I had originally planned to talk a little bit about what the Sociotechnical Cybersecurity speaker series is, but we are starting 15 minutes late, so I'm going to do it real quick. Cybersecurity, I claim, and we claim, that cybersecurity is an inherently socio-technical problem. It's not just the technology, and it's not just the people. It comes from this intersection and this interaction of humans and technology. So our research here in the iSchool on socio-technical cybersecurity spans risk, policy, privacy, disinformation, security education, and workforce development. So kind of a broad range of issues around building a strong cybersecurity posture and solid security work. And I'm getting some weird monitor things here. So a lot of cybersecurity research does end up kind of siloed, right? Either it's technical or it's not technical, and either it's happening in computer science or it's happening in some other field. And so we're trying to bring these different approaches together to have an approach that's going to be more impactful. So our talk today is going to be from Ido Sivan-Sevilla. He is an assistant professor at the College of Information Studies at the University of Maryland, studying the struggle of policy systems to govern harms from technology at the policy design, enforcement, and compliance layers. His work has been published or presented in the Journal of European Public Policy, the Journal of Risk Research, the Journal of Public Policy, Policy and Internet, Journal of West European Politics, NATO's International Conference on Cyber Conflict, FTC's privacy conferences, and the International Conference on Advances in Social Network Analysis. Ido was previously a postdoctoral fellow at Cornell Tech, earned his PhD in public policy from the Hebrew University of Jerusalem, was an MA Fulbright graduate in public policy at the University of Minnesota, and completed his BA in computer science from the Techn. He has a vast network and information security background, having served in the Israeli Prime Minister's office and in the Israeli Air Force as a captain. And I will let Ido give his talk intro.
Thank you, Susan. Thank you so much. That was too long of a bio. Sorry about
Next
that.
time.
I'm sorry about that. That's my fault. So I'm very happy to be here. Thank you all for coming here and remotely. I hope that those who are remote can hear me and see me. Probably, right? They don't have to be. Okay, cool. So I'm going to talk today about assessing the cyber attack surface of local government networks. But I will also take this opportunity to share with you a little bit about my broader research agenda, which is this mismatch between technology and public policy in a world that is increasingly mediated through computer systems, right? So our access to information, our access to health, education, socialization is all happening through socio-technical systems. And suddenly, the objects that policymakers need to govern are computer systems, right? They have huge impact on the values in society. And my research is trying to help policymaking and policymakers shed light on what's going on. So I am developing, adapting, applying what I call civic technologies for the common good, to understand how those socio-technical systems work, to inform policymaking over those systems, and to advance public policy, information science, computer science research on those issues. So what I'm arguing is that information policy research, the type of research I'm trying to do, sits in between those two well-known traditional disciplines of computer science and public policy. And by applying what I call those civic technologies to scrutinize central socio-technical systems, we can first better highlight social problems with technology, B, inform policymaking by addressing the gaps we recognize in policy design and policy implementation, and C, we can uncover novel dependent variables to advance computer science and public policy research, or to really understand new things we had no insights on them before. So I'm arguing that's a powerful tool to have and inspect the systems that govern our values. So my research agenda broadly, like Susan said, is the struggle of policy systems to govern technology, and I conceptualize policy systems across various layers. So in the first layer, we have the goals that we care about, and these are some examples: security, privacy, accountability, that our elected officials, our policymakers are trying to promote. So they codify those, they reduce those to rules and policies. And that's a very interesting process, I'm arguing. And I've been doing work on the US political system and the EU political system to understand how policymakers actually design policies for those problems. What are the politics of this? What are the institutional constraints? What are some of the reasons for suboptimal outcomes in the policy design process? We also have a second layer, which is the regulatory enforcement layer. So we already have a policy, we succeeded, we agreed on a policy, now we need to implement that, to translate that to enforcement practices on the ground. And I did a work on the European General Data Protection Regulation, a very, very promising privacy law at the 30,000 feet level, and I show how it has been differently translated, implemented with huge discretion across different member states. Right? So why the French GDPR is very different from the Spanish GDPR, etc., creating what we call regulatory arbitrage, where companies can actually exploit and harm privacy. So that's a very tricky layer that I'm trying to inspect in my research. And we have the compliance practices. Compliance is what happens when rules meet behavior, right? So we're trying to show compliance. We're the company, the tech company that needs to comply with rules. And I will show one project here about cyber attack surface, understanding how local government can or cannot, as we will see, comply with cybersecurity requirements. I have some more work on this, on the advertising ecosystem and the extent that the system can or cannot comply with privacy rules. In between, we have an interesting entity. We have those intermediaries, right? They sit in between the regulator and the company, and they're nudging the regulatory process. So think about NGOs, certification bodies, insurance. They sit in between the rule maker and the rule taker, really changing the meaning and the compliance of those policies. And I've been looking at certification bodies in the EU and on privacy NGOs in Europe, how they drive privacy compliance in ways they see fit. That was recently accepted to publication last week. We show a lot of discretion in how those civil society groups actually push for greater privacy, targeting the big tech companies, neglecting local service in their national jurisdictions. But our project for today is about understanding how local governments comply with cybersecurity. And this is very much a work in progress with Charlie Harry and Mark McDermott. And I mean, it is a work in progress, but we have some results to share, and we would love your insights on where this can go. So our starting point is the large attack surface that cybersecurity and local governments enable. There are, according to the Census Bureau in 2017, there are 39,000 what they call general purpose governments. So think about county, municipal, township governments that provide school, health, and infrastructure services to the community. This number is 5 years old. They measure it every 5 years. So we're expecting a new number soon. And since 2017, we have much more what we call IoT devices, right? Internet of Things devices. So this number is probably even higher. So a large attack surface for a potentially large attack surface in the local government level. Who is affected? The school of our children, public schools, hospitals and treatment centers, government networks, all those .gov domains, and wastewater services. And we also know, beyond the fact that this is a large attack surface, it is a highly threatened space, right? We see attack attempts on those sectors all the time, reported on a daily basis. This is just one example of a survey in this sector. Hackers like those local government infrastructure. infrastructures. They're usually not as protected as we want government infrastructures to be, and we wanted to see to what extent they're actually vulnerable to cyber attacks and can they comply with the cybersecurity requirements of their sector. So many gaps to fulfill in this space. We have well-documented gaps on poor cybersecurity practices at the local level, lack of preparedness, lack of funding, lack of organization, who is responsible, we don't really know, it's complex. And for our purposes, there is a lack of attack surface mapping. So IT is usually managed locally by the school, by the hospital, by the treatment center. We don't have an overview of what's going on. The vulnerability status is not compiled into an integrated picture, and that is what our tool is trying to provide for decision makers. So the first research question is empirical. How can we collectively, repeatedly, and automatically assess the cyber attack surface of local governments to assess how vulnerable those local governments actually are? So I'll show how we go about that. And secondly, we want to then estimate what is the assessed potential vulnerability in terms of how many devices and computers are vulnerable, what's the severity of that vulnerability of the national, state, and county critical infrastructures. What do we offer to do so? So we offer first a framework and then a methodology and tools that will facilitate automated, ongoing, unified reporting of risks of cyber attacks across government jurisdictions in the US. So we're offering what we call a first of its kind picture, integrated picture across the nation of what's going on with those local government services. How do we go about that? How do we actually do that? So we have many domains of government services, right? So these will be .gov domains you probably know about. These will be hospitals that are available that have their website and have their services available online. These will be our schools, so .edu domains. These will be wastewater treatment domains. So we have many publicly facing local infrastructures in the internet, and we feed our application with those different domains based on the county they're coming from. Once we have that in place, we're sending group of domains to commercial services, Census and Shodan. These are commercial services that provide port scanning services and reports back the IP addresses behind those domains. Usually one domain has more than one IP address. So what are the actual unique IP addresses behind the domain? What are the open ports of that domain? Maybe there's some negligence and they forgot to close widely exploited ports. What are the services open to exploit behind those domains? And what are the CVEs, the common vulnerabilities and exposures behind those domains that we should all be aware of? With that data is being sent to honeypot farms to actually understand, okay, how quickly hackers are likely to take advantage of that in the wild. In case they found an open port in a local school that we can do RDP, remote desk protocol, to that school, how likely they're going to take advantage of that. So we're trying to assess that through honeypot farms. We're still developing this, so this is yet to be developed. Currently, we rank our severity manually. I can share exactly in the Q&A how, but the idea is to automatically report back on the severity of the concerns that we found. So we have those government domains across counties, across the nation. We scan those, and then we get back the IP addresses, the open ports, the services. We then use honeypots to actually rank their severity. And with all that data, we can compile an integrated visualization of the different vulnerability at the state level and eventually at the country level. So letting policymakers watch those reds, those yellows, those blues, those greens, understand where my problem is, who should I contact now, what should I do, providing an integrated picture of what is going on. And feel free to stop me anytime for questions, of course. That's how I like to give talks. But that's the idea, that's the essence of what we're trying to do. And let's see some first results about what we have so far. Okay, so first results on Maryland County government. So these are all .gov domains in the state of Maryland, and let's see what we already see. So on the x-axis, you have the number of IP addresses that we found for each city or county, and in the y-axis, you have the number of unique open ports per each county. And you first see how the graph is pretty scattered, right? We have the highly populated counties, Baltimore, Montgomery County, have many IP addresses, right, with a high severity. There are some counties with low severity, with just a few publicly exposed IP addresses. So the picture is a complex picture that we're trying to highlight in this area. This is how it corresponds to a Maryland map. So you can see the different severity based on its geographical jurisdiction. Again, the highly populated counties provide ample opportunities for attack. Let's give some examples to make this data more real. So in Baltimore City, we found 68 unique IP addresses and 16 unique open ports, including SSH and RDP. These are very dangerous ports to leave open. We found them, for instance, in Baltimore County, Baltimore City database. So RDP was open, and this IP address for this SQL database, risking unauthorized access to a DB node. So this is the kind of insights you can get from that data. And it's not rocket science to close that port, right? It's just, lack of coordination, lack of attention that we can highlight through this tool. What we can also do with this is automatically send an email if we have a POC in every county or city. Once we found something bad, send that email, make sure it's closed, close the circle very quickly to make this city less vulnerable. Another example, Frederick County, 33 unique IPs, 12 unique open ports, again, including SSH and RDP, which enable hackers remote access to those infrastructures and services. We found an RDP server in the fire department of Frederick County, again, risking unauthorized access to a system at the county's fire department. Now, we don't just say that RDP is dangerous. We know that ransomware attack usually start with RDP exploitation. So they love that open port, the hackers love that open port to gain access and get resources, and if you're unfortunate, encrypt your system. Okay, how does it look for hospitals and treatment centers in the state of Maryland? So again, you see here, we have a much larger attack surface. So IP addresses are at the thousands here. And you can see much more red than we saw before. So much more IP addresses. Severity is much higher, so the map is much more red than it was before for county government. And this is an alarming picture because we know how sensitive that data might be in hospitals and treatment centers. For instance, from Montgomery County, what we find are 1,150 unique IPs with 33 unique open ports, including FTP and RDP. For instance, we found a database at this IP address with RDP open, risking unauthorized access to health data. So this is the kinds of insights that the tool can actually reveal.
While we're
Yes.
So it looks like there's a kind of a correlation here, right, between, well, especially in the prior graph, there's a correlation between
size and severity.
Size and number of open things.
Yeah.
And actually, if you go back to the prior one, the governments themselves, right? So you've got Baltimore City actually looks like it's doing relatively well compared to
the size.
The size,
Yeah.
right? Just got to represent here. But, and I'm wondering if that part of that may have to do with the ransomware attack a few years ago, right? So they've recently had an experience of this, right?
Yes.
That we have to lock things down. The other thing is there are certain offices in Baltimore City that are just now getting computers. So there's kind of a flip side. The comptroller is really excited about the fact that he brought computers to his office. He had to borrow a laptop from the mayor for a while. So yeah, I'm just wondering if some of the coloring is a little bit, not misleading, but just it's because it's so correlated with size.
Yeah.
If there's some weighting maybe to be done so it doesn't look like, because Cecil County here is at the same level as Baltimore City, and that's a much smaller, smaller jurisdiction, right? So you've got kind of this, to my social scientist eye looks like we've got a pretty solid line there. But you've got some that are above the line and some that are below the line versus the raw number, right? So I'm wondering if there's some like way to represent it such that it's, because the
More
other thing that jumps out on this US map, right, is that you've got,
that's
like, I can name all those cities, right?
Yeah.
All the reds are cities.
Our cities
So,
are highly populated, yes, exactly. They provide opportunities for attack. That's you're perfectly right. You're absolutely right. And I think, I mean, this is such a good question. This is the type of questions we can ask when we have the data. So we're still in the data collection process, and it's very interesting. Again, mind you, these are unique ports, okay? We have more than 15 ports open in Baltimore City. These are just 16 unique ports open in the city. And then the question is, okay, which port are these, and which IPs, what's going on? So now we can start asking the questions and actually dig deeper into Baltimore City IT management and ask those tough questions. And maybe do so even, like I said earlier, in real time, right? Email the IT at Baltimore, IT responsible for Baltimore City. Show them this is what's happening. Please close it. Done deal.
I wonder if there might be more decentralization though, based on, you know, the number of places you've got here, right? So, like, I'm not gonna say that, you know, the Baltimore City government might not be able to figure out whose server that is, but the Baltimore City government might not be able to figure out whose server that is.
Yeah.
So, trying to come up with ways to not disclose it before they wend their way through the process to get that.
Right. So that's maybe one of the reasons to show results like aggregated like this, so to not actually expose, you know,
the actual RDP ports that are like, oh yeah, here look, I found an RDP port.
Susan Winter, you had something?
Yeah, just that I feel the same sense that Susan Campbell's kind of like, what's the causality here? That, you know, all we're finding is that the bigger cities have more ports and you don't have well, this city is clearly not doing a good job because they've got 50% of their ports open, and this city over here, maybe a bigger city, but only has 5% of its ports open. And so this is you're getting a lot of population, but if what you want to do is find out where the vulnerabilities are, as opposed to whether you have some particular venues that are lax and some that are, you know, upright and doing things correctly, cybersecurity-wise. Those are just two different questions.
I agree.
To ask.
And I think what you're asking, correct me if I'm wrong, is how do you know that severe is severe, right? How do you
You're
rank
thinking
for
just
severity?
that it's like if I left all the windows open in my house, then there are more ways that people could get into the house.
If I'm a hacker, I need just one. That's the idea,
Yeah.
right? If we have a very widely exploited port open, then that's enough. So that's red for me. Even though you're doing perfectly fine in your 99 other windows, you have that window open, you can get to the kitchen is a dangerous place, etc.
Yeah.
That's the idea. So it's tricky. I mean, we can start asking those questions at least.
But yeah, I think you're right that if you normalize it by population, then you would be able to answer a different set of questions, which might be equally interesting, but they are a different set of questions.
Yes, I agree. Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Perfect question. Perfect questions. Someone from Zoom, or are we good? Okay.
I don't see any.
Okay.
Y'all are welcome to ask questions on the Zoom.
Yeah. Stop
you
me
know,
anytime.
use the Q&A, use the chat. Watching it, I promise.
Okay, so we saw what's happening in Maryland, at county government, at hospitals and treatment centers. Specifically, an alarming open port in Montgomery County treatment center, a database of a treatment center. And this is kind of an overview of the data we have on the state of Maryland. So you see the counties on the left, the sectors on the columns. So I touched upon government and health. We also have data on public schools. We also have data on wastewater infrastructures. So this is where this can potentially go. Again, the tiers are now still ranked manually, but the idea is to do that automatically as well. Complete the full circle. For instance, look at, again, Baltimore City. 158 unique open ports in the health sector.
I know.
That's crazy. Why? I mean, indeed, like you said, there are many IPs, right? 2,400 IPs, a bit more. But
It's probably
so many-
Hopkins, not Maryland, right? Sorry.
Sorry?
It's probably Hopkins, not University of Maryland, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And this is the type of data that we see. So we're expecting to see many HTTP ports open. SMTP DNS, okay, makes sense, but when it comes to SSH, MySQL, the vulnerable FTP, the vulnerable SMBs, RDP, these are all vulnerable ports. We have known, ready to be deployed attacks on those ports. It doesn't take a lot for any even not so knowledgeable actor to actually exploit those ports. And this is something that we need to take care of. Okay, so this is about Baltimore. Now, I have a interactive visualization on my laptop, so we will need to figure out how I can show this. But we were also interested in understanding what's happening in FEMA region number 3. And what do I mean when I say FEMA region? So the Federal Emergency Management Agency consists of 10 regions in the continental US and its territories. And our question is how the cybersecurity of county and city government plugs into those FEMA regions. Usually it's about floods, right, earthquakes, those disasters, and we're trying to plug in cybersecurity through this, through our tool. So these are the 10 FEMA regions in the US, and our focus is on region number 3. So Delaware, Maryland, Pennsylvania, Virginia, District of Columbia, and West Virginia. We don't have data on DC. It was a bit too complicated because of the federal infrastructures out there. But we're going to target those as well. Believe me, we're not going to give up. It's a bit more sensitive. So we have data on those five states. And the question is if I can show you this in a more interactive way, because I have it in my laptop. I need to share the screen as well, right? Do we have time for this?
Maybe. I might be able to, well, I pop it up on the screen.
Probably. Let's try.
Okay, let's not do that.
Okay. It's not working.
It's okay, I lost the, oh, right, I have to say this should be this, okay.
Yeah,
I don't
we
know.
can't do it.
We
That's
can't do
okay.
it, sorry.
No worries.
Next time.
So, but people can still hear me, right? Yeah, we're still same scenario. So I wanted here to zoom in and show you, I use Plotly, and it's a Python tool for visualization. It's a fun interactive tool where you can actually hover the mouse, see which county is vulnerable to what. What you can see here is all the 5 states across FEMA region number 3, and the level of severity for each county. And it's much more cool when you can zoom in and actually see how this spreads out. But due to technical difficulties in a cybersecurity speaking series, we cannot make it happen. So I'm sorry about that. I'm happy to share this with the audience offline, of course, anytime. But we're starting to go beyond the state of Maryland, right? We're starting to go across FEMA regions, get the picture, see what's going on, and give our policymakers some tools to understand what's going on. So I focused most of the talk so far on data collection, and you asked very good questions about data analysis, right? Maybe about theory, what drives all this. So this is where we want to take this as well. So, first let's summarize what we saw. So we see substantial variation in the attack surface across public sectors and counties. We see that much of the population lives in areas tiered as most concerning. We talked about it, right? And this holds for the entire FEMA region as well. If we could do zoom in, I would be able to show you that. But highly populated counties, areas are much more vulnerable. Again, not surprising, but we were able to show that. And again, many of the areas of concern come from ports and services that are regularly exploited by threat actors. There are obvious limitations of doing this, right? We're looking only at internet-facing devices, so counties and cities have much more internal infrastructure that we cannot access. And specific services might not be open to compromise if remediation efforts are in place. For instance, if I have dual factor authentication in place in Baltimore City, maybe it's okay that the RDP is open and it cannot be really exploited. That's true. Again, we can ask deeper questions once having the data. We can pick up the phone and ask whether that open RDP is backed up with dual factor authentication. We can start probing into the services and ask interesting questions using this tool. Okay, now research-wise, what's the contribution? Why I view this as a information policy research between computer science and public policy? So first and foremost, we're informing policymaking. This, I think, goes without saying, right? We provide a first of its kind integrated attack surface picture on a regular basis, right? We can actually follow who is closing what and when over time. Give that map public access so people can hold the counties accountable for not acting based on our findings. We can better understand cybersecurity compliance across sectors and regions. We can facilitate patch management, right? Enabling decision makers to know what is exposed upon the discovery of a new zero-day, right? If we found a new zero-day on RDP, then we want to get that picture and see where we have RDP open. That's very valuable for decision makers in this space. We can inform policy research, right? We can start uncover new dependent variables for policy research to actually explain variations, right? We get those maps. Now, okay, let's explain what's the theory behind this. What's drive lack of compliance with cybersecurity? Is it socioeconomic, demographic conditions? Is it an issue of red and blue states? Is it because of tax revenue in local jurisdictions? Is it because cybersecurity literacy in certain places, etc.? So we can ask many research questions from a policy point of view once we have that data structures, and we can inform computer science research. We're starting conversations with Professor Liu from University of Michigan. She was able to use host-to-vector method to actually scale and scan the internet at a greater scale. This actually enables first to visualize vulnerabilities at scale. So not only for counties or state, but globally, if we can represent text as vectors, right, we can actually show many cool things about the attributes of systems, of the devices that we scan, how they distribute, what are we likely to see, can we actually predict vulnerable hosts that we cannot scan, right? Once we have enough data, we can train our models and actually, we cannot scan Sweden, but we scan all the other countries, and this is how vulnerable hosts looks like. So likely in Sweden, we're gonna see this and that, right? This is the power of AI in this space. We can actually unmask hidden device attributes. So I cannot scan everything, but I have enough data to know what I'm expecting to see from that device. So machine learning can be very useful for this type of research. Okay, I think that's all I have. It is. Thank you. I'm thankful for my colleagues on this, Charlie Harry, Mark McDermott, and Rishipal Yadav. Thank you so much.
I have a question.
For questions. Yes.
So I guess this is a policy question. I'm thinking about like training all the people who are supposed to be aware of this problem, right? And
Yeah.
like credentialing to say that you're aware of cybersecurity.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking of maybe an example close to home, like defending your shell, where I can just take the quiz until I get the answer right.
Yeah.
And not really have to learn the implications. Would maybe putting more teeth in that credentialing process address some of these issues?
So training the people better, sanctioning if training is not completed, that type of thing?
Because again, like, I know the idea here is like, we just need to make sure everyone knows what these problems are, but I don't actually have to pay attention during the training is what I'm suggesting. Not saying that that's the case here at all, but there are certainly places where that is the case, right?
It is, yeah.
Would that alleviate some of this? Could it, if there was actually like accountability in that training?
I think you're asking, this is a problem of what?
Right.
Why do we see this? Is this lack of awareness? Is this lack of funding? Is this lack of organized IT capacities at the local level? Currently, those organizations, every dot in the map is really, is short-sighted to its own space, and
Sure.
you have very few IT folks
I
on
see.
those entities, and I think that's part of the problem. But maybe I'm wrong because I don't have all the data. Maybe once we see it, across the U.S., we'll have more interesting reasons to actually explain what's going on.
That
Yeah,
makes sense.
that's a good question.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned, just since we got a minute here, you mentioned that some of these ports may be protected by authentication and all you can see is that there is a port,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so.
There is a port that is open.
It's open,
Yeah.
yeah, it's not firewalled and it's not.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the reason somebody might have an open RDP port at all. And one of the reasons that I could think of was IT outsourcing.
Yes.
And so I was sort of wondering if there was kind of a way to, I don't know, I guess there's not really, I guess it's more of a comment than a question. But just sort of like how does, I know, you can tell we're academics, right? I'm just wondering like if there's a way to, to pull them. So, obviously you representatively pull that app and call them up and be like, hey, so you have an open port. And they're like, yeah, and we have like 14 layers of authentication on that puppy. Or you call them up and you open port and like, oh, do you need to see inside my computer?
So what's going on?
Yeah, so like trying to figure out like what that, I mean, that obviously you're looking really wide, so that's a really like, small question, but
Yeah.
I wonder if there's some correlation there around IT outsourcing and these practices of, we don't, because there's the individual level of do the users understand what they're doing, which is a whole thing. But then the IT professionals as well, do they have IT professionals? And are there IT professionals like running around putting out fires and they can't go look and see, okay, well this is clearly, if I were thinking about it, I would know to go check and see if I had open ports, but I'm like, we bought the server and, I got hired 2 years ago, the server's 6 years old. I haven't had a chance to even look at it yet. So I wonder if there's some way to use this to make an argument for better funding for IT security or better training, just to throw that one out there for IT professionals.
Yes.
Sorry.
I love this comment because this is the exact purpose of this tool, to actually enable us to ask those questions, right? Across the US, those who have 3 IT folks on their premise are red. Fix that. Okay, we can ask questions now. We can run a survey and actually find those variations. And I think that's, for me, that's one of the powerful aspects of this tool as it grows and it shows data across the nation. These are, I couldn't agree more with your points. That's absolutely true. We don't know what drives this.
So I have a nice, not simple, but a question from the audience.
Yes.
So Finley is asking, for clarification, the tier of threat is the port vulnerability rather than the information that's accessible through the service.
Correct. Yeah, good question. Yeah, we can only see that the port is open, and we know from previous research incidents that that port is dangerous when it's left open, so it's ranked red. Yeah. Good question. And I don't know if Charlie is online, but maybe he can add on what we're doing with iSchool UX team about visualizing. Is that online? Okay.
Sorry.
So there is an ongoing effort to build some kind of interactive tool for decision makers with this kind of data. So UX folks are now trying to characterize, design the needs, and help us make this more accessible for those who benefit from using that. So there is this interesting collaboration there that I thought it's worth mentioning.
Is there a version of this that you could give someone for their local government and say, here's this tool, you can run it on your own network and see these results like we see them, or is it?
So good question. So not the tool itself, but I can share with them my aggregated data, and they can click on their county, see the IP, see the ports. That's what I wanted to show you in the visualization. Yeah, it's not a big deal to visualize that once you have the data. It's pretty straightforward. That's why decision makers love this. Like, give me this, I need this. It's like it's something that's not there for some reason.
Yeah. That's super cool. What's the delay between the time you find an open port and the time that it gets published in the live data set?
That's a good question, I don't know.
I'm just wondering, because if somebody's out of the office, you tell them, oh, you have these open ports,
Yeah.
and they come back and suddenly everybody knows they have open ports,
That's a good point.
especially, people who maybe don't have necessarily their best interests at heart.
Yeah, we have to be very sensitive on how exactly we expose information or share information about what we find.
All right, well, any final questions from online or here? Anyone? All right, then I think we'll wrap up and.
Yeah, thanks for coming. It was fun.
Yeah,
Thank you.
thanks everyone, and we'll do this again next month. It'll be
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah.
All right,
Yeah.
yay.
Cool
Thank
talk
you.
about ransomware, so stay tuned.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we have an external speaker talking about ransomware.